I'm Shira from Shagarim Balev. Thank you all for being here for today's session with Max Landesman. He has the podcast Better for Shidduchim, and he interviewed one of our Shagarim, Elliot, and it was a great interview. So thank you so much for being here, and we'd love to hear a little bit more about what you have to say about making better Shidduchim. So thank you all for being here, and good morning or afternoon or
Good
evening.
morning. Yeah, good morning. I appreciate you guys having me on. There's nothing I love talking about more than shidduchim, for sure. It's my favorite subject. And I hope to be able to give maybe one or two tidbits, things that I've seen, just interviewing tons of shadchanim, just setting people up on my own, and we'll get right to it. So I want to start off with a story actually of how I set up my twin brother. And it all started, a friend of mine calls me up and she's like, you know what, Max? I've got a great girl for you. I'm sure we've all heard that before. Got a great girl for you. But for whatever reason, if you don't end up going out with her, I think your brother can go out with her. So in my mind, we're two very, very different people. For someone to just say, hey, you should go out with her, but if it doesn't work out with you, you should go out with somebody else. Now, to the naked eye, it sounds like, you know, to her, it's like, oh, two from guys. They're the same people. Nothing else matters. Let's just send someone there. So what I said was, um, we're obviously very different. If can I ask you a question on, just to see if this match is even applicable to my brother or to any whatever. She's like, sure. I'm like, hypothetically, if I know my brother is very, very into learning and that kind of thing, he also wants a very, very frum girl. So I said, hypothetically, if this girl's husband did not learn for one day, would she be upset or would she not be upset? She's like, she would not be upset. I'm like, then it's definitely not for my brother. So what ended up happening was that she's like, Max, that's so funny. I actually have a friend who's been complaining to me constantly that the guys she's been going out with are not firm enough for her. She wants a firmer guy. I'm like, bingo, bingo. It was a simple question. So long story short, they ended up getting married. They're married today, thank God. They're moving to Cleveland, whatever. There's obviously more to it, but the idea behind it is asking a very, very pointed question can make things so crystal clear as to how this can work. So what's actually takes this even a step further is Sarah, who is his now wife, was actually they tried to set her up with him in the past by sending a resume. People who know me know I'm very, very against resumes in general, not against the concept, but it's lacking what really people want to know is what actually really matters. I know my twin brother probably better than anyone other than himself. And in some cases, I feel like I know him better than himself. But this was a very, very, very big deal to him. I know it because a lot of from girls will put down on their resume looking for a guy that davens 3 times a day. But I don't think they take the time to sit there and actually understand what that means. What that means is that when you're on vacation somewhere in the middle of Nowheresville, this guy is now going to want to get up during dinner and go to shul, right? And a lot of women actually might not want that. So in this case, when they presented my brother with this particular match, he didn't even remember they sent him the match to begin with because all they led with was she's just another girl. Here's her resume. By the way, she's so nice. All they had, so I just wanted to start off with that. So the typical process, I want to get into what I see as the typical process. I see it all the time. The first question I think Shadchanim ask, which I think is it doesn't really help as far as getting to the core of what someone really wants is, so tell me what you're looking for. And I love to hear from people on this panel is what is the typical response when someone asks you, so what are you looking for? What's a typical response you can hear if anyone wants to chime in?
A good heart.
A good heart. Okay. Good heart. Anyone else? Not that I know you got something.
Uh,
A nice person who comes from a similar background that I do.
Sense of humor.
Sense
yeah,
of humor.
I think guys are going to say someone who's, a good-hearted, nice person, but really they just want someone who's attractive. That's going to be step one for a majority of guys. It's just the way
Okay.
it is.
Okay, great. And typically they're going to go down the line and give you a lot of very generic information. I'm looking for someone who just understands me for who I am. It's all very nice, but what I think it's lacking is direction. Just like in the example I gave was, it's a very, very specific question. If the guy didn't learn for one day, would she be upset or not? Very pointed, very direct. It's either yes or no. And if you don't know the answer to that, that's a bigger problem because that means you don't know the person. I feel that one thing I really like about Shagririm is the fact that people that are setting other people up are people that really know the person.
Not
In
true.
my,
Not
what?
true.
They're
Not true?
supposed to. They're supposed to.
Supposed to, but
Okay.
not always.
So they're signed up as a friend and they don't know their friend. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying a lot of times there's sometimes I've seen it where it says like, what's your relationship to the person? And it says, I'm their shadchan. So to me, that means they don't know them. Like they're not their cousin, they're not a family friend, they're just on there as a shadchan. So that to me is a
Okay.
red flag a little
Yeah, so
bit.
that's something we're trying to, I could say we're trying to avoid that in many ways, but it's sometimes it's inevitable. But you're right. Our main goal is really that it should be people who know, that know each other. And we see like in terms of those are usually the shidduchim that really work. A lot of siblings are setting each other up, things like that. So it's
Sharon, thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate it. But yeah, the gist of it is in order to set someone up successfully, you really do got to know the person. So again, it's kind of like asking a kid, what type of car do you want to drive? Without asking for budget, without asking for, specifics about safety or anything, what they'll probably tell you is, well, I would love to drive that Ferrari, and if you just ask a simple question such as, okay, what's your budget? They would be like, well, 30,000. I'm like, well, that's probably not gonna. It's just, again, getting to what really matters to that person. Finding out what I would actually ask as a first question is tell me a deal breaker. Tell me something that you absolutely, under no circumstances, can tolerate in another person that would just never work for you no matter what. And they'll tell you. It's just all about asking pointed questions. Try to get as specific as you can, and try to create a clear picture as far as looking for someone. Another thing that I'd like to bring up is question everything. Just because someone says A doesn't always mean they mean A. For example, you can ask a guy, and a guy would say, I would never date a girl who's taller than me. Okay? They're just making a statement. What a typical process would be like, okay, so this guy is 5'9". I'm never going to set him up now with a girl who's 5'10". What I recommend doing is following that up with a question and being like, would you date Carly Claus? Carly Claus was a supermodel, whatever. 9 times out of 10, a guy would be like, sure, yeah, absolutely. Of course I date her. I'm like, did you know she's 6'2"? I'm like, oh, I never thought about that. And all of a sudden they're open to dating. So I'm like, so height really isn't what matters to you. It's about how good looking she is. And be like, okay. So now height actually doesn't matter. So it's just asking a very, very simple question and kind of pushing the lever on how much does this person really value what they're saying? I'm looking for someone who's tall, who's shorter than me. I'm looking for someone who's taller than me. Just like a woman who would be like, well, I would never date someone who isn't 6 feet tall or higher. I'm like, that's great. That's great. So if I found someone who's literally drop dead gorgeous, makes $1 million a year, but happens to be a half an inch shorter than you, are you telling me you wouldn't date him? And if they really, really absolutely cared about height, they would be like, Max, without flinching, they'd be like, Max, I absolutely would not date him. Fine, move on. Majority of the time, they will crack under pressure because it actually doesn't matter.
Can I
It
make
actually doesn't matter. Go
a
ahead.
couple of suggestions?
Go ahead.
One is that maybe in terms of getting clarity on like what they mean, it would be helpful to make a distinction between what's a deal breaker versus what's a preference. So they might still have a preference for a certain height, but knowing what is movable and what isn't, I think is the real like goal here, if I understand you correctly.
Okay, so if just to clarify, you're saying when someone makes a statement, you want to ask a follow-up question saying, well, is that a preference or is that a need? Is that what
Well,
you're saying?
meaning you can ask many follow-up questions like you're suggesting, but I sort of feel like the there's going to be a big difference between, meaning like just because they might be able to date a taller supermodel doesn't mean that they don't care about height. It just means that it's not a deal breaker for them. Whereas if they said no, even if it's a supermodel I want, so then it classifies it as a deal breaker rather than just a preference.
Well, yeah, I think we're saying the same thing
Yeah,
because
yeah. I was just trying to hone in your point a little bit to make sure I understood. And then one other thing is that I would suggest is that like when like navigating or like following up to get clarity with additional questions, like what I've seen is that it's very common for it to turn into like almost argumentative, like where the shotgun is like, no, why should you care about that? Why don't you, do you really care about this? Which doesn't, serve the relationship with the matchmaker. So I'd say like maybe like I'm a big believer in what you're saying in the sense of like investigating further, but at the same time, I feel like handling it in a way that's ally driven rather than like challenge driven can make a big difference in terms of the relationship.
Zach, it's a great point that you mentioned, and I'm so glad you brought it up. Acknowledging is a very powerful tool. I'll give you a specific example. I'm a professional salesman. Um, my past job was helping people out of credit card debt. The people I was dealing with, I hate to say it, are really brain dead. And what I mean by that is someone who's $30,000 in debt um, is now calling us and trying to figure it out. But he's like, well, I don't want to do a service that's going to help me out of debt because I need to get a loan to buy a Harley Davidson. Right. So it's the typical response would be like, you're an idiot. First address your debt, then worry about, but you can't do that. The way I think you brought it up, that's really great, is simply acknowledging and then just asking further questions. You can never just tell someone just to throw out like, well, you're being too picky, you're being this. I think what you're asking for is ridiculous. And what you can do is what I would like to do is just further question. Again, in the example that I gave was, I will never date someone who's not 6 feet tall. And then you just ask a follow-up question to clarify, and then they will then tell you with their answer if that actually matters or not. So instead of saying, well, you're never going to find anyone if that's all you're looking for, 6 feet, and then it becomes an argument. Instead, I think you can get to the same result just by simply asking a question. Does that make sense to you, Zach?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank
Awesome,
you.
awesome. Anybody else have any questions or? Okay, great, great. One thing that actually I found that works for me that I think is something a lot of people do not do is it's something we do in sales is typically everyone will think of every great, like when they think of an idea, they're thinking of all the great reasons why this can work. And in sales, what you have to be prepared for is something that's called rebuttals. You're going to get rebuttals. And so when someone calls you up and says like, hey, I've got a great idea for you. She's the greatest girl in the world. She's this and that. What the guy is thinking on the other end of the phone is like, what's the catch? What's the catch? Right? They're going to want to know all so before I actually before I actually thought about making a match, I actually thought of every possible way this match cannot work. before you actually make the quote unquote pitch. So I'm thinking of, well, I know this person won't go out with someone who's, fill in the blank, right? And let's say that person is that. So it's technically something that someone actually cares about. So how are you going to pitch this person? So what you can do is when you bring it up to the person you want to quote unquote send the idea to is be like, listen, I understand you mentioned that you don't like XYZ, and I totally acknowledge that. And if you don't want to go out with this person, by all means, here's why I feel this is absolutely phenomenal for you. Here are all the reasons why. I know that you truly care about someone who's going to be there for you no matter what. I know you came from a divorce home, whatever it is. You absolutely do not want that. I know this and just go on and on and on. Essentially, when you know what actually triggers someone, what really matters to the person, you can act all of a sudden the little tidbits of I don't go out with someone who's 5'8" versus 5'9" and things kind of go out the window, and you're just focused on what really kind of sells. And when they have a rebuttal, they're like, well, he's this or that. Come prepared. Come prepared. Like, you know what? You're 100% right. Acknowledging is a very powerful tool. Instead of just being combative and saying like, well, I think you're ridiculous, I'll be like, certainly understand where you're coming from and go on from there. Anyone have any questions on that at all? Okay, great. So yeah. So what I would actually focus on is when pitching, bring up the negatives first. And so I want to tell you another story actually, where it's the first person I actually set up is a friend of mine, and when I when I was originally telling him about, I happened to know both. I happened to know the girl and I knew the guy, and I mentioned this to the guy, and he's like, okay, Max, can I ask you some questions, whatever it is? I'm like, great, you can ask me all the questions you want, but you have to do it in two questions. You can ask me any question you want, but you only get two questions. Why did I do that? The fact that I knew him so well and the questions he was asking were so like ridiculous and they actually didn't matter at all. I don't even remember the questions he asked. He doesn't remember the questions he asked, but he was just simply asking because he was nervous or, he was coming up with every excuse not to go out with someone, whatever. And typically what I see a lot is when people are constantly asking a million questions to the shotgun and be like, well, are they this? Are they that? Just ask them, how much does this matter to you? And they'd be like, well, it's a deal breaker. Well, it doesn't really matter. So why are you asking, essentially? Sometimes people ask questions, they're not actually asking, they're just kind of pushing you off. So if someone is taking forever, what I like to do is if someone is actually being absolutely ridiculous, there is no harm in saying, listen, it was great working with you. I just don't see this working. You're It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's a partnership. It's a partnership. If someone's just constantly asking a million different questions, I don't even think they want to go out at all. And they're just making things up. And it's something to just kind of think about when you're matching someone up. And finally, my last point, I think we can wrap up with this is when, I always appreciated when someone brought an idea to me and they're like, Max, I believe in this so much, I'm actually willing to pay for the entire date. Now, I would never actually accept money to go on a date. The fact that he was willing to put his money on the line because of how much he believed in the date is literally reason enough for me to say yes to someone. And so before making a potential idea or match, are you willing to put your entire reputation on the line for this idea? Have you thought this completely through? Have you thought about every way this possibly can't work or any potential rebuttal someone will ask about, well, this is why I wouldn't want to go out with you, and go over those before you actually pitch? I feel like you would have a lot more success in people taking what you're bringing them much more seriously than because people are constantly bombarded with different ideas and that, and people aren't specific. I feel like if you are dead on specific, to what someone really actually cares about, more often than not, people are actually going to say yes to those suggestions and take you seriously. And with that, I'm happy to open up the floor to any questions or anything like that.
Nathan, you have a question?
Oh yeah, Max. So I think we've spoken before. I was actually on Max's podcast, the best podcast out there. Good for Shidduchim. Everyone should tune into all the episodes. But I think we had spoken about how you used to just say yes to like 99% of matches suggested to you, right?
Yeah,
Like if someone suggested, you would just say yes. So now when
because
you're getting a shidduch,
I trusted
yeah, yeah,
them.
yeah.
Yeah.
So now when you're getting a shidduch resume or someone thinks of an idea for you, what are like I guess the three things you're looking for in a resume or anything like that?
So I actually, if someone just sends me a resume, someone actually sent me a resume. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? What would you like me to do with this? I know that could come off a little bit different, but I really don't like resumes because what I feel is happening is someone is just forwarding a resume. Second, I feel that someone is just forwarding a resume, I don't take them seriously at all. The people that I truly listen to are people that A, know me, or B, understand what I'm looking for, or even just taking the time to get to know me a little bit to understand what I'm looking for. And if you can do those two things, I'm willing to listen. If someone is just forwarding resumes, which happens all the time, I won't take it seriously. And does that
Okay, let's
address?
let's say they take 10, 20 minutes to get to know you, and then they're sending you a resume based on what, you had a 20-minute conversation with them, and then they're sending you resumes. Hopefully they're more on target.
Yeah.
But
Well,
then you
I think it depends how much you explain yourself and how well it's very hard to present yourself in a few minutes. Sometimes,
mm,
that's what I think, but
yeah, no, exactly. Well, again, it's not about just sending the resume, but for example, someone would send me is like, Max, I've known you for the last, I met you at this event, et cetera, et cetera. I think this is what you're looking for. Here's why I feel it's a good match. And I actually do listen to that. I'm not actually reading the resume. There's nothing to read. Where they went to school doesn't matter to me. I don't care. Whatever. They want to send a picture, great. But honestly, to me, I value the relationship I have with this person. And
mm.
I will tell them, listen, if they say, here's why I feel this is a match. And if for whatever reason, I'm usually willing to try it out. But for whatever reason, if something I see doesn't fit my specific criteria, let's say I happen to know someone who knows them and they told me X, I'll bring it up there. I'm like, this is a potential reason I wouldn't want to go out with them. Do you know them well enough that this is actually true? Something like that.
There's nobody here. No. Please shut your video. Yes. How do you do it? I don't want to.
Yeah. Does that make sense, Natan?
Yeah, yeah, I got you. I mean, I think it's more just was it sending resumes back and forth, get to know the people, and then once you have an understanding of the person, obviously, I think the best matches are friends of friends. Like if I'm trying to set a friend up and I know the friend personally, I can hone in, I know exactly what they're looking for, and then they pretty much say yes to every single idea because I got to know them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's that simple. It's that simple. Anybody else have any other questions?
Daniela, you wrote something I saw in the chat um, about it's not worth putting your life on the line for resumes, putting too much money. Um, about people doing it for money. I think that at the end of the day, most people don't really, I mean, you could tell me I'm wrong, Max. I don't know if people really do it for money as much if they're trying to help their friends, but
Could ask Matt about the WhatsApp chats these days. I don't know if he wants to speak about that.
so I mean, yeah, some of it's interesting to compare. I mean, some of us are in Israel as well, and so the WhatsApp chats in both countries are very different, I think, from what I've heard. Yeah.
I think I don't want, I'm not going to throw anyone specifically under the bus or anything, but I think it's a very valid point that you're making about do you feel you're being essentially taken advantage of for money? And I do feel that a lot of people do feel that way about certain things. And I think that's all the more so how much more value you put into quote unquote your matchmaker, where, I'm of the personal belief that your matchmaker is kind of like your partner in a way, where you can be very, very open and honest with them about what you're looking for. Here's the reason why, et cetera, et cetera. But again, if it's not reciprocal in either way, if you feel that they're taking advantage of you, if you feel that they're just not listening to you at all, I know a lot of people feel, despair. How else am I going to meet someone if I don't deal with all these different people? I feel that it's much better to just work with one person you truly can trust and that actually listens to you versus working with 10 other people that don't have 2 seconds to talk to you,
Do you
essentially.
think it's worth like doing it for friends and family instead of putting your life on the resume?
I'm not a big fan of resumes, Bichlal.
I hate resumes because every time I try to like put one on, like they always tell you where's this from, where's that from. Baruch Hashem, I'm in this system, which I'm really grateful for, but a lot of people aren't in this system, and like in a way, I feel like they could pair with someone that's like from this person and that person without not even knowing each other.
Right. For example, let's say, they ask for your resume.
Because from
Sometimes,
my experience, they always give me someone who's defective or has something that I don't feel connected with. And not to mention, they want money down. That's why I asked this question because so many people can't afford this money. Not everyone can struggle and pay that much money for shidduchim. I think it's actually really pathetic. That's why I asked the question on the chat.
it's
Yeah,
very
Matt,
valid.
I don't want to get into junior, but I was at a panel with Shadchans last week at Nachal Novia, and I said, do you guys feel it's right for Shadchanim to charge monthly fees? And all of them said yes. When I
Well,
view
this,
Shadchanim as, look, if you make a shidduch, you should get paid. Like, it's like a real estate agent, but they all said that Shadchan should have a right to charge monthly fees in a WhatsApp group.
yeah, I'm obviously not the biggest on charging for a WhatsApp group, but what I will say is that there's a big disconnect between singles and shadchanim in general. I think, when you look, because I've heard from both sides, and I'm obviously single myself, I get it. Um, Shadchanim do this, let's say as Shadchanim are doing this as a quote unquote hobby. Singles are doing this because it's their life. And you have to understand that as a single person, have to understand that, and right? So when we talk about charging, et cetera, or if it should be free or whatever, it's very, I know a lot of really good shadchanim that don't get involved at all because they feel they just don't have the time to do a really good job. If they were paid like a full-time salary, they could do this for real. That's one idea. Fine. What a lot of singles do is when you meet with a shadchan and they're helping you out, that's fine. But when someone is constantly bombarding a shadchan every 12 seconds of the day, shadchanim feel that, that's already over the top. And that's when we start charging, et cetera, or whatever. Would I personally pay for a shadchan? Probably not. I don't. But from a shadchan's perspective, that's where they're coming from. That they're constant. That I also don't feel it's fair that a single should take up, call him every day. Why haven't you sent me anyone or whatever? I do think that a matchmaker should set I would say what do you call it? The idea that, I may not have a match for you today. I may not have a match for you tomorrow. Could be a year from now, but I'm always thinking of you, whatever. But if they're telling you, I'm going to set you up this month and you never hear from them, that's another deal. But there's two sides to that story. Would I personally pay a shotgun? No. But I hear what you're saying. It's a big concern.
I think Eitan just wrote in the group and just saying there's a distinction between like why you connect and WhatsApp chats. Like why you connect or adopt a shot. Some of these sites that are sending you 8 to 10 targeted matches, they're you're on the phone with them once a week. It's different than just like the right to be in a WhatsApp group you have to pay.
Yeah, WhatsApp groups. I can go on and off. We talked about it extensively. I'm not going to get involved in it here, but yeah. Any more questions or?
I see Aviva asked a question here. I don't know if you have an answer about how many phone calls until meeting. But she says in a second marriage and over 50. Do you have any insight on that? And when it's long distance?
How many phone calls?
Yeah.
So
Clarify that?
Sure, go for it.
Hi, thank you so much.
sure.
Well, okay, so I'm a shach and I'm also divorced. And I find that very often I find myself speaking to men numerous times, and then we don't wind up meeting. And I'm just wondering, maybe I'm speaking to them too much. Maybe we should meet after a certain amount of phone calls. And generally, it is long distance, so there is an investment. But I find that, people are not willing to invest in the effort of going to see the other person.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I'm not well versed in that side of the realm. However, I do know someone, a close family friend, that is on the older side. And she's been complaining about the very same thing as you are, where men are just not putting in the effort to go drive or whatever, the hour and a half, etc. I can't answer for your specific case. However, I think I could answer for the typical case that I see is where, from a guy's perspective, where they're just being pitched a bunch of matches, and then they're saying, well, why won't you go meet this person? I think in those specific cases, I don't think it has anything to do with they're not willing to go drive to the match. I think what's really happening is they're not convinced of the match itself. And they're not actually willing to, because they've been burnt before. They've been sent a million matches. They drive an hour and a half, pay tolls, etc., and it was totally off, right? In your case, you're speaking to them. So I think there's a very, very big difference in that. So I'm not going to address that, but I think for just someone who's just being sent an idea, they haven't really spoken or etc. I feel like they're not sold on the match itself, and that's why they're not willing to go. But that's my own personal opinion.
I see Aviva's writing in the chat also that they're not interested in marriage. They also live in a candy store of New York. They could have different candy every night.
You know, I find that the older the men who are older and have been married and they've been burnt and they've, gone through much of their life and have grown children, they a lot of them live in New York and New Jersey. They're not really interested in marriage. I think they're maybe lonely and they want to, someone who they can talk to on the phone. But when it comes to putting in the effort and actually meeting somebody, they're not
It
doing it very
it
often.
it's very, very possible. Maybe it could be a future episode on the show. Maybe we can have you on as a guest and we can talk about it. It's very, very possible. It's a very good point.
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you.
It's a very good point. Sure. Sure. Any other questions? All right. I think is that about it?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Max. This was really interesting. You have a lot of food for thought, and hopefully we should have lots of successes. But thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. Have a great day and a good evening, depending where you
Thank you
are in the
so
world.
much.
And
My pleasure. My pleasure. Have a great day,
bye.
rest of
Thank
your day,
you.
guys. Thanks for joining.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you. Take care.
My pleasure.
Take care.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.